The Washington Commanders and New Orleans Saints quarterback positions are going to be massively impacted by injury. We got all of that and much more for you on this crossover edition of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome into this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Commanders and the Locked On Saints. We are your host, David Harrison, the daily host over at Locked On Commanders. Myself, Ross Jackson, your host over at Locked On Saints. And we appreciate you very much for being here with us, making us your first listener, for being an everydayer here on the show. On this crossover Thursday episode, we're going to go through what each of these teams needs to do to get a win. Fast starts, but sustained success being the name of the game for both of these teams. We're also going to dive into why the ground game will win the game in this matchup, and leading it all off with a look at the quarterback position and how it's massively impacted for both of these teams by injury. We appreciate you very much for being here with us and for joining us for another episode, whether you're catching us for your first time, your next time, whatever it might be. We thank you very much for being an everydayer, making us your first listen here on Locked On Commanders and Locked On Saints, both a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, as all of our crossover Thursdays are. Download the Prize Picks app and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. David, the quarterbacks are in keen focus here. Jayden Daniels, the front runner for Offensive Rookie of the Year, and some quarterback who will take snaps for the New Orleans Saints. That's got to be the headline in this matchup.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, like the little bit of a secondary, right, like lineup here or storyline here is Jayden Daniels returning to Louisiana. This time last year, he was just a few days removed from winning the Heisman Trophy. So I'm sure that there's a little bit of crossover of LSU Saints fandom. Excited, hopefully, to see Jayden Daniels back. And I feel blessed because, you know, I'm an Arizona State guy, so I got to see him return. Physically to Arizona State campus where they practiced ahead of the Cardinals matchup earlier this season. Now I get to see him return to Louisiana. Of course, Jayden is going to play all of it down and be like, I appreciated my time there and all the success, but I'm focused on what we got to do this weekend. And truthfully, he is that way. But yeah, man, I mean, this quarterback matchup, it's a quarterback-driven league, right? Passing game, obviously, is the king in the National Football League. But what's going on around the quarterback position? Obviously, Jayden is fine. But what's going around the quarterback position in this game is going to be huge, even if it's not necessarily going to be the factor that dictates who wins this game.
Yeah, while the New Orleans Saints are trying to figure out who their starting quarterback is going to be, Jayden Daniels and the Washington Commanders, of course, dealing with injury with wide receiver Noah Brown, which impacts kind of that next option behind Terry McLaurin in terms of who becomes the go-to guy in the passing game. David, if you had to take a swing at who you think that second option would be, they got the veteran tight end in Zach Ertz. You've got Jameson. Jameson's kind of dealing with some injury and stuff like that too, but where do you think the passing game production comes outside of Terry McLaurin for this Commanders offense?
Yeah, I think that second target in line has to be Zach Ertz, and he's someone that we saw during training camp have a really good connection with Jayden. Now that connection hasn't blossomed during the regular season as much as most of us thought that it would, to be quite honest with you. But without Noah Brown, like the thing about this Washington Commanders, I almost said Arizona Cardinals offense, which would still apply if it was like 2 years ago. Cliff Kingsbury, this is no secret, right? Cliff Kingsbury kind of likes to line his guys up where he likes to line his guys up. And that's part of it. The air raid feature, the air raid offense features that kind of a system as well. And while Terry McLaurin is lining up split wide left almost 80% of the time this season, Noah Brown is lining up split wide right 70% of the time this season. So like these consistent alignments are not new or not isolated to just Terry McLaurin, but Noah Brown, 338 snaps lined up wide right. And it just so happens that Jayden Daniels, last time I did the math, about 67 of his pass attempts are going to the middle or right side of the field. He doesn't like to throw to the left. He doesn't like to scramble to the left. He doesn't like to slide to the left. He likes to do everything to the right. I kind of liken him to a point guard where he's only going to drive right. So what does the defense do? They shade to that side of that point guard. Well, defenses have started shading to that side of the quarterback here. And the Washington Commanders finally made an adjustment against Tennessee Titans 2 weeks ago and started moving Terry McLaurin more to the right side, or they would run him from the left to the middle to the right side of the field to get him those looks as well and bring him into those windows, which is great. But without Noah Brown there, like I know Noah Brown's not this elite number 2 receiver in the NFL, but teams that turn on the tape still see that he's capable of finding open space, capable of making plays. And now guys like De'Ami Brown, who this preseason, we weren't sure he was going to make the active roster. Olamide Zaccheaus, who is a veteran journeyman who's been around a little while. Luke McCaffrey, the rookie, who's mostly a slot. He's only played 35 snaps out there. I actually kind of wonder, Ross, like Terry McLaurin's going to be your number one option lined up outside left. The primary guy lined up outside right for Jayden Daniels when he looks that way might be Terry McLaurin. Like maybe you see Terry McLaurin, maybe it's like a 48-52 split this week, and they moved a little bit more than usual. And like the Saints might know, like, hey, Terry's on the right, probably going right. Terry's on the left, probably going left. Okay, you know that, but now you still have to defend the route combination, and you still have to prevent us from getting the ball to Terry. This might be one of those games where Cliff needs to flex the creativity a little bit, also flex Terry McLaurin's knowledge, because he's a guy who prides himself on knowing what everybody's doing on the field.
Yeah, and look, for the Saints, they play sides. Their corners do not shadow receivers. On the left side, it's Alontae Taylor. On the right side, it's rookie Kool-Aid McKinstry. That's what they're going to play this. They're not going to move guys around. The only guy that's going to move around a little bit is slot corner Ugo Amadi, who just played maybe one of his best games of his career, did it very quietly, but did that up against the New York Giants. And so wherever Terry McLaurin is lined up, if he's on the left, he's pulling the coverage of one corner. If he's on the right, he's pulling the coverage of a different corner. So it's going to be really interesting to kind of watch what that chess match is going to look like, just to kind of give some numbers behind it. 65, 50, 73. That's Alontae Taylor on the left side over the course of the past 3 games. 68, 44, 74. That's the number for Kool-Aid McKinstry over the last 3 games on the right side. So these guys are very evenly split. And that, of course, includes 0 snaps on either of their non-dominant sides. They've only played over on their side over the course of these last 3 games since Marshawn Lattimore was traded away by the New Orleans Saints to the Washington Commanders. And of course, they did the same thing with Marshawn. He didn't shadow receivers. He just played one side of the field. So that's a big part of it. Before we jump over to take a look at sort of the defensive side plus the ground game in this game, the Saints, of course, someone's going to play quarterback, David. There will be one. I promise you that. They just don't. They have not announced who that quarterback will be yet. The overall expectation, and you can kind of get it from some of his social media posts here as of late, is that it's going to be Jake Haener, the second-year quarterback from Fresno State, who was kind of brought in. Derek Carr has been his long-term mentor and all those other things. He was drafted just a couple of years ago. They, of course, gave Spencer Rattler, the rookie out of South Carolina, his opportunity over the course of the 3 games through week 6 and 8. So it looks like potentially the next thing is going to be to take a look at Jake Haener. We'll see if that holds, but the Saints say that they truly have not made a decision yet, and they will continue to have those 2 quarterbacks battle it out. That is what we saw a bit of during practice as well when we were there on Wednesday. So we'll see which way it goes. I do think there's some gamesmanship here. They're going to keep saying, yeah, well, Derek Carr could play even though he doesn't practice, but there's no way Derek Carr's playing this weekend. And the one of the Saints staffers used to have a phrase that was like, just because you could doesn't mean that you should. And that applies to Derek Carr in this situation.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's no reason, honestly, I know the Saints aren't like officially out of it and all that stuff, but if everybody's being realistic, there's no reason Derek Carr should risk what he would be risking. There's no reason the Saints should be risking what they're going to be risking by playing Derek Carr. I was listening to a Saints podcast hosted by a very smart gentleman named Ross Jackson talking about how, you're going to need Derek Carr next year. So like, don't mortgage your future, to try to get a win against the Washington Commanders in December this year or anything like that. And I think that's great. I'll tell you right now, Commanders fans are mostly concerned about the idea of Spencer Rattler starting. And I think it's that elusiveness, right? It's that second ability, that ability to extend the plays. And again, to give you all kinds of credit, right? I read one of your articles on LouisianaSports.net, your exclusive with Spencer Rattler, and how he talked about, going from those 3 games he played, kind of looking back on, okay, if I could do it again, what would I do differently? And he talked about extending those plays and creating that second play that Jayden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, those guys are so good at doing, creating that second play and really stressing defenses because it's really hard for any corner, any secondary, including guys like Marshawn Lattimore, to cover for 5, 6, 7 seconds if a quarterback can get out of the pocket and stay alive as a passer. So Commanders fans honestly would rather see Jake Haener because they would be a little bit more worried about Rattler's ability to do that. And then obviously his awareness that that's something that he needs to do better at the next time he does get on the field. But at the end of the day, man, I mean, you know how this game goes, and everybody watching this show or listening to this episode knows how this game goes. Like Jake Haener, Spencer Rattler, Ben DiNucci could come out there and look, nobody expected Cooper Rush and the Dallas Cowboys beat the Commanders.
I'm saying.
But it happened. So, there's a lot of other factors here, including, again, from the Commander side, going back full circle, who is going to be that second receiver, right? That even if Zach Ertz is the second, target guy, who's going to be that second receiver, and how much does the loss of Noah Brown impact them in this game?
Yeah. I'm just going to let all Commanders fans know right now, if your concern is players extending plays, Jake Haener can do it too. So we'll see which way it goes. We'll see which way it goes with the New Orleans Saints, as they will make that announcement very likely tomorrow. But I think they know who the guy's going to be. It's gamesmanship. It's good coaching. It's good gamesmanship. Like, this is what you do in the NFL. You take every advantage you can. Coming up next, we're going to be taking a look at the ground game for both of these teams, because both David and I are convinced that that's the way that you win this matchup. And both teams have been, not so great at stopping the run, but have been very good at actually executing the run. So one of these teams will have to come out on top. We'll get to that next as we continue on with our crossover Thursday, Locked On Commanders and Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel has the Washington Commanders heavily favored by more than a touchdown. Road favorites in this game, 7.5 point favorites coming into this one. They have the over-under set at 43.5 points. Maybe you want to get in on that action. Well, you can do so over at FanDuel.com today, and it's a great time to do it if you are a new customer, because you can put $5 down and get $150 in bonus bets back if that $5 bet wins. You can download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today. You could dive in on the live bets, live stats, live play-by-play as well, all in the same place where you place those bets. It's FanDuel.com. That's where you're going to go to join today and get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's episode also brought to you by friends over at Game Time, the best place to go to grab your tickets for your favorite events, including if you want to grab some tickets for the Commanders and Saints game, you can find them over at Game Time today. Game Time is one of the only places where, as the event gets closer, the tickets get more affordable. And of course, you get a bunch of other perks and features as well. There's Game Time Picks, which is a curation method that makes it easier for you to find all of the best deals on your favorite sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. You can toggle on all-in pricing so that you're never taken by surprise by fees. By the time that you get to checkout, you can even see your view from the seats before you buy those tickets. So take all the guesswork out of buying tickets by checking out Game Time today. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, everybody, continuing on this crossover Thursday edition, Locked On Commanders and Locked On Saints. It could be the run game that puts this one to bed, David. I think both of these teams are going to be looking at trying to control this game on the ground, but the Washington Commanders have a little bit of an extra weapon over on their side, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm still shocked to this day. And again, it just shows you how shocked I am about the fact that the Philadelphia Eagles didn't stack the box once against Brian Robinson Jr. And not only did they not stack the box once against them, they got away with it. You know what I mean? It was one of his lowest output games. The offense did basically nothing, scored less than 20 points, which is not something that the fourth highest scoring offense in the NFL this year does on a regular basis. So they're clearly, this team is clearly a power run first team. And I don't just say run first, they are a power run first team, which I know doesn't go with the typical Cliff Kingsbury reputation. And obviously Jayden Daniels is the star and the rookie of the year candidate and all that stuff, but it really is predicated on getting that ground game set up first. And then, there's some real substance to it. Some of it's just kind of a no duh thing, but the Washington Commanders are undefeated when they win the time of possession battle, and they're less successful. The only game they've won this year when they lost the time of possession battle was against the Chicago Bears, which I think most of us would agree they probably should have lost that game.
Yeah. Right.
And Tyreek Stevenson would definitely agree that they should have lost that game as well. So, it kind of goes hand in hand, time of possession, running the ball, controlling the clock, and then also getting into the end zone. You obviously have to finish with points on the board.
Right.
So it's not just about running the ball 30 times. You have to do it successfully. But the more that Brian Robinson gets involved, the better off the Washington Commanders are going to be. And then on the flip side, the New Orleans Saints have a pretty good running back too, who very shockingly, Ross, I don't even know how this has happened, has not scored a touchdown since mid-October.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I need to know. There's a lot of Commanders fans who just went, what? Unless they play fantasy football and they know that already. I need to know why that's happened.
Well, I think that's been a Taysom Hill thing. That's been you know what I mean? Like, and then when they get in the red zone, they've gotten more comfortable throwing the football too. And if you look back at like the best years of Alvin Kamara's career as a touchdown scorer, a lot of his touchdowns came in the red zone, like more than 80%, 75% of those touchdowns all came in the red zone. So I think that's a big reason why. But the fact that he hasn't scored any in the passing game either has been because the last 2 or 3 times that he scored in the passing game, there's been some offensive penalty that has wiped it away too. So that hasn't helped over on that side of the football. But I'll tell you another thing that Alvin Kamara is on the threshold of might be a little bit shocking for people that don't follow the team as closely, is that he's 62 rushing yards away from his first career 1,000-yard rushing season. He has never had a 1,000-yard rushing season. Now, he has been an all-around back and one of the best all-around backs in the NFL and in NFL history. If you look at, the numbers and everything that he's done so far compared to, the history of the NFL, he's been outstanding there, but he just hasn't had an offense that's trusted him to be the sole kind of rusher while also getting him out space. And this is the first time I'm going to be careful not to say Clint Kubiak, or rather to not say Clint Kingsbury, because I have a bad habit of doing that. And then now Cliff Kingsbury is over on the other side of this very conversation. But that is something that Clint Kubiak has done incredibly well. So I think that he, as well as second-year running back Kendre Miller, who made a nice return to the field last week, 10 rushes for 32 yards, a 3.2 average isn't going to, it's not going to be an eye-popping number for a lot of people. But really, the before the 4-minute drive or the 4-minute drill at the end of the game, that he was over 4.5 or right at 4.5 rushing yards per. But then you get to the point to where you're like protecting a lead. There's 4 minutes left in the game. Everybody knows you're running the football. All those things ended up kind of dropping his average a little bit. But an outstanding 8-yard run where he just kept his legs churning and got pushed into the end zone by his healthy offensive line. These are all things that I think have to come to fruition for New Orleans when they go up against the Washington Commanders, who have had a little bit of trouble. They've allowed, I believe it's the 5th most rushing yards per attempt on inside runs. So that's going to be a big thing that you're looking for Kendre Miller, number 25 for Commanders fans, to kind of be that complement to Alvin Kamara, because then you can get Alvin Kamara involved in the outside run game and start to try to take advantage of a bit of what you can get out in space up against this Washington Commanders defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something, like perimeter run specifically, something that gave the Washington Commanders defense fits early on. And Jeremy Chin, the safety, who's trusted a lot to kind of, make that pursuit and read that and hit those gaps and click and close, as people like to say sometimes about pursuing ball carriers. He's gotten better at that. You know what I mean? He's definitely gotten better at that, but still the Washington Commanders are giving up the 6th most yards per carry overall, like total 4.77 yards per carry. And they're allowing 137 yards per game, which is also ranked 27th in the National Football League. And that is where, if you're looking at the Washington Commanders defense, it's weird. Like if you look at mock drafts and team needs and all that stuff, you're going to be like, well, the secondary is obviously the weakness, because that's where everybody says they need to go in the first round, go get a corner to maybe play next to Marshawn Lattimore or opposite of Marshawn Lattimore, along with Mikey Sainer still, to really solidify that secondary. But the secondary actually has gotten a lot better, and the pass rush has gotten a lot better than, it was in the first few weeks of the NFL season. And this secondary, I don't know the current ranking, but still one of the better defenses in the NFL, not allowing explosive passes and forcing offenses to really kind of grind out these drives and really earn every point that they get. But when you look at the New Orleans Saints, I mean, it's not a surprise. Like Alvin Kamara, one of the best players in the league, I think, to this day. I think, what is he, Ross? Like 4th, I think, in scrimmage yards right now in this season. Bobby Wagner just Wednesday in the locker room said, look, like obviously there's a quarterback situation, but at the end of the day, like 41, that's who we're worried about. Like that's the guy that's going to tip this thing. And when you look at the New Orleans Saints 5 wins, something that stood out to me in their 5 wins, those 5 games all came in amongst the games where they had 92 or more net rushing yards.
Yep.
I was shocked, Ross, 214 net rushing yards against the Cleveland Browns.
Against the Browns, yeah. Well, that happens on the back of 130 plus from Taysom Hill, who had 240 plus yard runs in that game.
Yeah, listen, for Saints fans who don't recognize me from Locked On Bucks crossovers, I'm so happy I don't have to talk about Taysom Hill multiple times a year anymore. And believe me, I'm happy that the Commanders don't have to face Taysom Hill. Not happy that he's hurt. Like, never would go that far.
Just
but
happy
I'm happy the Commanders don't have to
prep against them anymore.
Yeah, but you look at this, man. I mean, look, the numbers go from from ranking the net rushing yards by the Saints this year: 214, 197, 190, 180, 143, 97, 96, 92. Like, as these yards go down, the losses that happen get worse. The wins happen. Like, they stack up, right? The 180 or more net rushing yards, they're 3-1 in those games. But then you get down, 143, a 7-point loss to the Rams. With 7-point loss, you're still in that game, right? Like, you're in that game. The 23-point loss to Denver, I think that's the anomaly. It's a Spencer Rattler game. Yeah. It's not a Derek Carr game. And then even the 96 and the 92, like, those are the lower net yardage outputs from the top ones. But those are Derek Carr games and their wins. And obviously Derek Carr's not going to be out there. So that just kind of reinforces why the quarterback situation is as important as it is. But the bottom line is, when the New Orleans Saints win this year, they do it largely by having some success in the run game. When the Washington Commanders lose this year, they do it by and large by having struggles in the run game and therefore losing that time of possession battle. Also, offensive struggles happen a little bit too there, but the things all kind of correlate, right? So when you're looking at the New Orleans Saints, Washington Commanders this weekend, that is going to be incredibly important. Who gets the run game going fastest? Who gets it going first? And who figures out a way to stop the opposing running game the fastest and first, as well, as I think is going to dictate who wins this game.
Absolutely. And when we talk about fast starts and sustained success, that becomes a formula for this win beyond the run game. So that's what we're going to get to next as we take a look at what the Commanders and Saints need to do to get wins this weekend as NFL Week 15 continues to roll along. We appreciate you very much for being here. We got that coming up for you next. We continue on with this crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by friends over at Built Rewards. If you're a renter, listen up, because this is about to be an absolute game changer for you. Thanks to Built, you can now earn points on rent payments the same way that you do with like groceries and travel and all that other stuff. And it comes with some awesome perks along the way. And best of all, it's completely free to join. All you got to do is check out Built Rewards. They're going to give you valuable Built points that you can then redeem for hotel stays, future rent payments, and more. They've got over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in their program. You pay rent, you earn cash, you earn points back that you can then cash in for some of these big opportunities. I absolutely love it. I use it because I figure, you know what, why I got to work for rent. I might as well make my rent work for me too. So you can join and start getting points on the rent that you're already paying by heading over to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnfl. That's joinbuilt.com/lockedonnfl. Make sure you use our URL so that they know that we sent you. Don't wait. Start earning your Built points today. Everybody, Locked On Commanders and Locked On Saints crossover Thursday here, taking a look ahead to this New Orleans Saints hosting the Washington Commanders game and what these teams need to do to get a win. Today's episode, as all of our crossover Thursdays are, brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. You can download the app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. David, let's do your keys. We'll do my keys, and then we'll break them all down. What are you looking at here for the Commanders?
Yeah, I mean, the first foremost, establish the run. We already talked a lot about that, but clearly that's very important for this Washington Commanders team. So that's going to be number one. Number two is to score early. And number three is harass that quarterback. Whoever, Jake Haener, Spencer Rattler, both of them. Both Ben DiNucci, you know what I mean? Just harass them. Don't let them get comfortable.
Absolutely. For the New Orleans Saints, it's not entirely dissimilar, man. It's run the ball effectively, as we've discussed. It's avoid their mid-game slump. They've had some issues in the second and third quarters. And then it's managing the run game on the opposite side, which becomes a part of the conversation of limiting rookie quarterback Jayden Daniels as best as you can. So we know the run game is going to be absolutely vital here. Let's talk a little bit about the fast start and the sustained success that these two teams need. Like I mentioned, the New Orleans Orleans Saints in the second and third quarters have seen slumps under Darren Rizzi so far. Interim head coach Darren Rizzi has spoken about this during press conferences. I think that's going to be a big focus this week. They talked about kind of keeping the second half going. They even made the second half of practices a little bit more intense. I think the next thing they're going to be doing here is trying to figure out how to make that midsection of practices a little bit more intense as well. Get this team a little bit more conditioned and ready to go to keep it going for not just the first 15 minutes and the last 15 minutes, but everything in between as well. But the Commanders, of course, are looking at fast starts over on their side.
I'll tell you what, Ross, what I really like about Coach Rizzi, and again, I don't even know him, right? Like, but just like what I've seen and what I've learned, and from watching your show, I learned a lot too, is like, he's obviously more Dan Campbell than he is Dan Quinn.
Yes.
But like Dan Campbell, Dan Quinn, Coach Rizzi, like they're all like super aggressive. We're going to kick your butt. Like they're all the same mentality. Just Dan's more of like the kind of the quiet aggressor, whereas Dan Campbell is obviously the super loud. And I really dig what he's doing. And I think the Saints, like you look at, the 3-1, record under this new interim head coach. I think it just kind of goes back to like coaching matters. You know what I mean? Coaching matters, identity matters. So I don't know what the future holds, but I really like what he's done. And I really like how the team's kind of resonated with that. But speaking of, fast starts, going over the 3-game losing streak that the Washington Commanders went through, and this kind of reinforced a little bit what we talked about the defense, how the defense in Washington really started off as a liability, and it was this rookie quarterback and castaway offensive coordinator that really had to carry everything for the first probably quarter of the season while the defense got its feet under itself. But now the defense is playing a lot better and actually keeping the offense in some of these games where they've struggled, as Jayden has dealt with that rib injury and then dealt with defenses learning him a little bit better, and also his coordinator having to adjust to those things as well. But when you go back to the Pittsburgh Steelers game, the Steelers scored once in their first 5 possessions. The Eagles scored once in their first 6 possessions. The Cowboys scored once in their first 7 possessions, which is funny to me because it's 5, 6, 7, literally. And it just kind of shows you how much that offense was struggling during that 3-game losing streak. And you look at the Saints, and the Saints are not giving up a lot of points. You know what I mean? Under this new attitude, I'll put it. It's not like they went out and made a whole bunch of wholesale changes and brought in a whole bunch of new players. Like, so it really just kind of shows you the impact that an identity, I think, can have. So this Washington Commanders offense, like, they've got to come in understanding, like, you're 8-5, they're 5-8, but you're not opposite teams. Like, you're very similar type of teams. And if you don't come in with respect for this team, you're going to find yourself in that position. And you talk about kind of that second, third quarter gap in that middle quarter of the game. I know not like every coach really harps on that middle quarter, but a lot of coaches do harp on that middle quarter. And Dan Quinn loves boxing analogies. So with the Washington Commanders, and when for Saints fans who've never seen the Commanders play, when you watch this game, what you're going to notice is it's a lot like a boxing match. Like in the beginning of the game, there's jabs, there's some slight hooks, just kind of trying to feel out what's going to land, what's not going to land, what are you defending. That middle quarter is like the third, fourth, fifth round of a boxing match, where that's where we're really going to try. Okay, we think we have you read. Now we're really going to try to land some haymakers here, really try to put you against the ropes. When the Washington Commanders can't do that in that middle quarter, now you get to the back half of the third quarter, early fourth quarter, you go back to that Eagles game specifically, the Cowboys game, that's where a puncher starts to get a little bit nervous. It's like, okay, I scouted you out. I tried to land some stuff. I haven't been successful. Now I'm like, okay, now what do I do? The Commanders are kind of the same way. And so that's for the Saints. Like, if the Saints are going to win this game, and if they're going to need to make sure that coming out of that middle quarter, halfway through the second to halfway through the third, for those who don't know what that means, they've got to be in the game. You got to be within 3 to 10 points. You can beat 10 points and still be okay, depending on the game flow. But for the Washington Commanders, that's where, if this defense keeps the Saints scoreless through 6 drives, 1 score through 7 drives, Jayden Daniels, Cliff Kingsbury, Noah Brown or no Noah Brown, second receiver, no second receiver, you've got to find a way to put up points and to start landing some of those haymakers before that middle quarter ends, so that going into that last round, that last quarter, there's a lot of confidence rolling into it.
Yeah, and the Saints are a team that very much believes that if they walk into, and I think every team believes this, but it's become a big part of their focus messaging, is that they believe that if they go into a fourth quarter with a lead, that it is their game to win. And that if they lose, it's because they beat themselves. Like that's the way that they look at it very much is that. And it's a lot of that messaging comes from Demario Davis, the star linebacker for the team, who's been, an incredible leader in the NFL, as well as for this New Orleans Saints team for years since he was added in 2018. But his whole thing is if they walk into the fourth quarter with a lead, it's their game. That's the attitude that they have. So that's very much what they want. They got to be able to withstand some of those haymaker attempts in that middle quarter. Darren Rizzi has specifically pointed out the first 2 offensive and defensive drives before the half and the first 2 offensive and defensive drives after the half. So effectively the same thing that Dan Quinn is pointing out. So both of these coaches looking at that very, very similarly. Last thing here so that we can, as we wrap up, just looking at the idea of getting after the quarterback and when it comes to Jayden Daniels, just limiting the quarterback when it comes to the run game as best as possible. That's got to be a big focus for the New Orleans Saints. And the Saints have their full complement on their offensive line. They got it back last week against the Giants, first time since week 3 that they had their starting 5. Performed extremely well against the pass rush last week, but obviously are going to be put in a bit of a different situation here with a new cadence and a new quarterback, a young quarterback that they're going to want to keep protected against that Washington Commanders defense.
Yeah, man. I mean, Jayden Daniels against the Titans looked like Jayden Daniels again. Like from that rib injury against Carolina Panthers, he hasn't fully looked like him until that Tennessee Titans game. And he really looked like he was fully him. So I think the Saints are going to get that best version of Jayden Daniels against them. And for the Washington Commanders defense, like you mentioned, again, all these Commanders fans, I'm getting text messages from insiders and also like I'm scared of Spencer Rattler a little bit. But like you said, like Jake Haener, like he doesn't get the pub about it maybe that Spencer Rattler it does, but certainly can move with the ball as well. What I do like as far as what the Commanders defense can potentially do, regardless of the quarterback, Rattler has the 3rd highest sack percentage among quarterbacks with 99 or more pass attempts. Haener 14th highest sack rate among quarterbacks with 29 or more pass attempts. A little bit obviously of a more wider scope there, but Rattler also 11th highest turnover-worthy play percentage. Jake Haener hasn't had turnover-worthy play yet, according to PFF, but 29 pass attempts. We'll give him some more time. He'll get a turnover-worthy play in there. But Dante Fowler Jr., Frankie Louvu specifically have been playing with their hair on fire. You know what I mean? Both those guys are top 10 in the linebacker group in Pro Bowl voting right now for a reason. Part of that reason is Commanders fans are passionate, but they also deserve it. You know what I mean? They're getting after quarterbacks, and what this defense has shown is they have the ability to get up into the middle of the pocket, force quarterback to commit one way or the other, and then Dante Fowler, Frankie Louvu just waiting to clean that mess up. I'm also really curious, and for Saints fans, if it's something you want to watch as they try to penetrate the middle of that defense, Sheldon Day, veteran defensive tackle, has really made some impact plays, not in the stat box as much, but when you talk about leading to productive plays, Sheldon Day has been big. And then Carl Davis, we'll see if the veteran defensive tackle gets called up from the practice squad again, but he's a much better run defender on the defensive line next to rookie Johnny Newton than Fedarian Mathis is. Fedarian Mathis was a healthy scratch against the Tennessee Titans. So I'm really curious to see, because Dan Quinn didn't say it as much, but I can tell you it's because of run defense. Fedarian's not very good against the run. I'm really curious to see if Carl did enough to get called up again, and if Fedarian Mathis again ends up a healthy scratch, because that's going to be, I think, very impactful in this game.
Yeah. And then on top of all that, you got Jayden Daniels returning to Louisiana. Marshall Lattimore returning to the Caesar Superdome. Chase Young taking
David
on
Harrison
the
returning to the Superdome.
Harrison returning to the Superdome as well. And of course, John Ridgway revenge game on the way.
Yes.
We got it all in
John.
this matchup. Me too. John. He's a great dude. All right, there you go. That's everything you need to know about this matchup. Literally, we covered it all. This was awesome. This was so much fun. If you want more on the Washington Commanders, make sure you go and check out David Harrison at dharrison82 on your favorite social media, as well as over at Locked On Commanders every day. You can find me over at Locked On Saints, as well as at Ross Jackson Nola on your favorite social media. And we will see you again here very soon for another episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Saints. Make sure your second listen today is Locked On NFL. Get all the biggest stories from around the league with Tyler Rowland and Tony Wiggins, giving you all the daily double dose over there. We appreciate you very much for making us a part of your day and for being with us. Make sure you check out both of our insider programs as well. That'll be linked in the description if you want more early information, secret information, some breakdowns, all that other stuff. We got it all for you. Make sure you come and check it out. We appreciate you very much. We'll see you here again soon on Locked On Commanders and Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.